I led 4 men into St. Joseph's Maronite Cathedral during their Good Friday service, grabbed the golden cross from the altar with both hands and lifted it above my head to smash it on the marble floor in front of 300 worshippers. But the moment my fingers closed around that cross, my chest seized, my heart stopped, and I collapsed dead on the floor of that church. And what Jesus showed me during the 7 minutes I was clinically dead, the one prayer that actually makes God angry, shattered everything I thought I knew about faith, about Islam, and about every prayer I had ever spoken. Have you ever been so sure your prayers were reaching God that you never once considered they might be the very thing pushing him away? My name is Tariq Samir Al-Husseini. I am 29 years old, and on April 15th, 2022, I walked into St. Joseph's Maronite Cathedral in Beirut, Lebanon, and ripped the cross from the altar during the holiest service of the Christian year. I had no idea that within seconds my heart would stop beating, that I would stand before Jesus Christ himself, and that he would show me the one type of prayer that fills God not with love, but with grief and anger. I grew up in the Tariq al-Jadida neighborhood of Beirut, in a cramped third-floor apartment above a bakery, close enough to the Al-Amin Mosque that the call to prayer rattled the dishes in our kitchen cupboard 5 times a day. The streets below our balcony smelled of fresh manouche bread in the morning and exhaust fumes by noon. My father, Samir Fuad al-Husseini, was a respected Islamic teacher at the neighborhood madrasa who spent his evenings writing religious commentaries at our kitchen table. He was not a casual believer. He was a man who measured every breath against the standards of the Quran. My mother Leila wore the hijab even inside our home and ran a weekly women's Quran circle in our living room. My grandfather had been an imam in the southern city of Sidon for 35 years, and his photograph hung above our front door like a promise that our family's faith would never waver. While other boys my age played football in the narrow streets or gathered in internet cafes to watch videos, I sat on the floor of the Al-Amin Mosque and memorized the Quran. By 15, I had completed the full memorization, every surah, every ayah. The sheikh placed his hand on my head and told my father, "Allah has given you a son who will carry the banner of Islam." I never missed a prayer, not once. Not when I had a fever that kept me in bed for 3 days. Not when we traveled to visit relatives in Tripoli. During Ramadan, I fasted without a single word of complaint and added voluntary fasts on Mondays and Thursdays because I believed that every drop of hunger brought me closer to paradise. My father taught me from a young age that Christians were misguided people who had corrupted the true message of God. He said they practiced shirk, the unforgivable sin of worshipping a man as God. In Beirut, Christians and Muslims lived side by side, but my father drew a line between us that I was never allowed to cross. He told me their churches were houses of idolatry. Their crosses were symbols of a lie. By 16, I had joined a youth group that distributed pamphlets outside Christian neighborhoods, warning Muslims against attending church services or forming friendships with Christian families. We protested outside churches during Easter. We shouted at worshippers as they entered. I once threw a stone at a stained glass window and felt nothing but pride. I had no idea that the God I claimed to serve was already watching me and counting the days until he would show me the truth about my own prayers. By 25, I held a degree in civil engineering from the Lebanese University. I worked for a construction firm in the Hamra district. I married Yasmin bint Khalid, a devout woman from a family as strict as my own. I had everything a Muslim man was supposed to want: career, wife, faith, community respect. Ask yourself this question: have you ever built your entire life on something you were absolutely certain could never break? The plan to disrupt the Good Friday service did not begin with me. It came from Sheikh Mazan, a fiery preacher at a small mosque in the Sabra district, who had been speaking for months about the growing boldness of Christian evangelists in Beirut. He said someone needed to send a message. When he learned that St. Joseph's Cathedral was planning a large Good Friday service to commemorate the crucifixion of Jesus, he called a meeting. He said the idea of hundreds of Christians publicly celebrating the death of a man they called God was the highest form of blasphemy, and that we had a duty to confront it. I agreed instantly. The thought disgusted me. They were worshipping a dead man and calling it holy. Someone needed to show them the truth. I had no idea that the Jesus I planned to humiliate was preparing to reveal himself in a way so terrifying and so beautiful that my entire understanding of prayer and God would shatter in 7 minutes of death. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever hated something so deeply that you never stopped to ask whether your hatred was blinding you to the truth? I chose 3 men. Walid, my cousin, who had been part of the youth group since we were teenagers. Umar, a university student whose knowledge of Islamic theology exceeded anyone I had ever met. And Fadi, a quiet mechanic who followed wherever I led without hesitation. We studied the cathedral layout for 2 weeks. We memorized the service schedule. We chose the moment during the Good Friday liturgy when the priest would lift the cross for veneration. Our plan was simple. Walk in during the service, push to the altar, take the cross, smash it on the marble floor where everyone could see, then walk out. I felt absolutely certain that Allah was guiding every step of this mission. The night before, I could barely sleep. I rose at 2 in the morning and prayed the tahajjud, pressing my forehead to the carpet and asking Allah for courage and strength. But as I prayed, a strange heaviness settled onto my chest, like a hand pressing down from the inside, a weight I could not explain. I dismissed it as nerves, perhaps Satan trying to weaken my resolve before a righteous act. I had no idea that what pressed against my chest was not Satan. It was a warning. Everything I believed was about to be destroyed. Have you ever been so convinced you were defending truth that you never questioned whether your actions were actually righteous? We arrived at the cathedral at 7:30 in the evening. The April air was warm and carried the scent of jasmine from the gardens along the street. St. Joseph's rose above us, pale limestone glowing in the fading light, a bell tower reaching into a sky streaked with orange and purple, a carved stone cross above the arched doorway. People streamed inside, families with children, elderly women with scarves over their silver hair, young couples holding candles. A heavy wooden door stood open and golden light spilled out onto the steps. We walked in. An elderly woman with kind eyes and a white lace shawl smiled at us and said, "Welcome, God bless you on this holy night." She had no idea who we were. The inside of the cathedral hit me like a wall of sensation. Hundreds of candles flickered along the walls and the altar, casting golden light across carved stone columns. The smell of frankincense hung so thick in the air I could taste it. Stained glass windows threw pools of crimson and blue and gold across the marble floor. An organ played a slow hymn that seemed to come from the stone itself. Hundreds of people sat in wooden pews, some with heads bowed, some holding small wooden crosses, children sitting quietly beside their parents. There was a peace in that place that I did not expect, a stillness that reminded me uncomfortably of the deepest moments I had ever felt in a mosque. I had no idea that the peace I felt was not coming from the building. It was coming from someone already present who was watching me. I gave the signal. We moved. I pushed through the center aisle. The congregation gasped. A mother pulled her daughter close, An old man stood and then slowly knelt where he was. I reached the altar. The cross was there, golden and polished, mounted on a carved wooden base. I grabbed it with both hands and lifted it above my head. The priest, a man with a white beard and gentle eyes, raised both hands and said calmly, "Brother, you are welcome here. This is a house of love." His voice was not angry, it was kind. It confused me. An elderly woman in the front pew looked directly at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "Jesus loves you, son. He died for your sins just as he died for mine." I did not want kindness. Their peace made me furious. I wanted resistance. I wanted someone to fight back so I could feel righteous. I gripped the cross tighter and raised it higher, ready to bring it crashing down on the marble. That is when it happened. The moment that changed everything I believed about God. A pain exploded in my chest, not from the outside, from deep within, like a fist closing around my heart and squeezing. My arms went numb. The cross slipped from my fingers and clattered to the marble. My knees buckled. I collapsed. My vision went white, then black, then nothing. I was told later that my heart stopped for 7 minutes. The priest rushed to my side. Someone called an ambulance. Omar began CPR while Walid stood frozen in shock. But during those 7 minutes, I was not on that cathedral floor. I was somewhere else entirely. I found myself standing in a space with no walls, no floor, no ceiling. Only light. Golden, warm, living light that came from everywhere at once. I could feel it on my skin. I could feel it inside my chest. And standing before me was a man. He wore white so bright it hurt to look at, but I could not look away. His face was the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. Not terrifying because of anger, terrifying because of love. A love so vast and so deep that it felt like standing at the edge of an ocean that went on forever. I knew who he was. My soul recognized him before my mind could form the thought. It was Jesus. He did not speak with words that came through my ears. He spoke directly into my heart. The first thing he said was, "Tariq, I have loved you since before you took your first breath. Even while you hated me, I never stopped." I fell to my knees. Tears poured down my face. I could not stop them. Then he showed me something that broke me open in a way I will never recover from. He showed me a vision. I saw myself praying. I saw myself at 2 a.m. on my carpet, pressing my forehead to the ground, whispering words to Allah. And then Jesus said the words that I hear every single day of my life. This is the prayer that angers God. I was confused. I was praying. I was devout. How could prayer anger God? He showed me more. He showed me the prayer from the inside. He showed me what was truly in my heart while my lips were moving. It was not worship. It was not love. It was a transaction. I was praying to earn. I was praying to be seen. I was praying to build a wall between myself and everyone I considered beneath me. I was praying for the destruction of people God loved. Every prayer I had spoken asking Allah to crush Christians, to punish unbelievers, to destroy churches, every single one of those prayers had landed on the heart of God like a wound. He showed me that the prayer that angers God is not the prayer of a sinner who cries out for help. It is the prayer of a religious man who uses God's name to justify hatred. It is the prayer that says, "Lord, I thank you that I am not like them." It is the prayer that performs devotion on the outside while carrying contempt on the inside. It is the prayer that turns faith into a weapon against the very people God is trying to reach. I collapsed forward in that space of light. I wept harder than I have ever wept in my life. I saw every prayer I had ever prayed replay before me, and I saw how many of them had been aimed not at heaven, but at other human beings. I had spent my entire life praying, and I had not once prayed with the thing God actually wanted: a surrendered heart. Minutes could have been hours. Time did not exist. The love I felt was so overwhelming that every hateful word, every stone I had thrown, every pamphlet I had handed out, every shout I had hurled at Christians entering their own church, all of it rose up inside me like poison being drawn out of a wound. And He forgave it, all of it, without me asking. I had no idea that what I called devotion was the very thing keeping me from the God I claimed to serve. Ask yourself this question: how do you explain standing face to face with the living God when everything you were taught told you He was dead and powerless? I woke on the cathedral floor. The priest was kneeling beside me with his hand on my forehead, whispering prayers. The first thing I saw was the cross lying on the marble beside me. The first thing I felt was warmth, the same warmth from the vision. It had followed me back. I looked at the priest and could barely form the words. I saw Him. I saw Jesus. He showed me. My prayers were wrong, all of them. The priest's eyes filled with tears. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "He loves you, son. He has been waiting for you your whole life." I asked him what I should do. He helped me to my knees and prayed over me. I spoke words that came from deeper than my own mind. "Jesus, I have been wrong about you my entire life. I have hated your people. I have used God's name to justify cruelty. I have prayed prayers that wounded your heart. But I saw you. You are real. You are alive. Forgive me for everything. Save me. I surrender my life to you completely." The cathedral erupted. People who minutes before had been terrified were now weeping with joy and embracing each other. Walid was sitting on the floor against a pillar, staring at nothing, tears running down his face. He told me later he felt a wave of heat pass through his body the moment I collapsed, and he knew something beyond this world had entered that room. He gave his life to Christ that same week. Omar followed 2 weeks later. Fadi fled the cathedral and has not spoken to me since. I was baptized 9 weeks later in that same cathedral. The priest poured water over my head and gave me a new name: Augustine, after the man who spent his youth running from God and then spent the rest of his life running toward Him. What happened next changed everything, and it cost me everything I had built. When my father learned what happened, he came to our apartment. He did not knock. He stood in the doorway with a face made of stone. His voice was cold, dead. "You are no longer my son. You are dead to this family. You have brought more shame upon us than any enemy of Islam ever could." He turned and walked out. He has not spoken to me since. My mother sent one text message: "How could you do this to us?" Then she blocked my number. Yasmin, my wife, found a small cross the priest had given me. She threw it across the room. She screamed that I was a kafir, a traitor, an apostate who had destroyed everything. She filed for divorce that week. I never saw her again. I lost my engineering position. Death threats arrived through messages I could not trace. Friends I had known my entire life held a janaza prayer for me, a funeral for the living dead. I had no idea that following Jesus would strip away every single thing I thought defined who I was. I had to leave Beirut within 2 months. I crossed into Jordan carrying nothing but a bag and a Bible the priest had pressed into my hands the night I died on his floor. Ask yourself this question: could you give up your family, your country, and your name for something you discovered was true only after your heart stopped beating? But I gained everything that truly matters. I gained Jesus Christ. I gained a forgiveness that every prayer I had ever prayed on my carpet had never come close to giving me. I gained a peace that does not rise and fall with what happens around me. I gained a church family in Amman who took me in and loved me as if I had always been their brother. I gained a new way to pray, not to perform, not to earn, not to condemn, but to simply say, Jesus, here I am. I am yours. Today I live in Amman with my wife, a Christian woman named Elena, whom I met at the church that first sheltered me. She saw a man who had lost everything, and she chose to love him without conditions. We married in a small ceremony at that same church with white flowers and tears that would not stop. The priest from St. Joseph's traveled from Beirut to officiate. Walid and Omar stood beside me as groomsmen. Over 100 Muslims have given their lives to Jesus Christ after hearing my testimony. I work with a ministry that shares the gospel across Lebanon and the Gulf through encrypted channels and secret gatherings. I still write letters to my parents by hand twice a year. I tell them I love them. I tell them about Elena. I tell them about the prayer that changed everything. No reply has ever come. But I send them because love does not stop. My son was born 6 months ago. The first sound he heard was not the adhan, but a whispered prayer of thanks to Jesus that Elena breathed over him while I held them both and wept. I had no idea that dying on a cathedral floor would be the moment I finally started to live. I return to St. Joseph's once a year. I stand on the exact marble where I fell. I kneel where I once tried to destroy, and I pray. Not to earn anything, not to prove anything, just to be with Him. Ask yourself this question. If God can stop the heart of a man who hated Him, show him the truth about his own prayers while he was clinically dead, and then send him back to tell the world, what makes you think He cannot reach you exactly where you are right now? The Muslim man who grabbed that cross and lifted it above his head no longer exists. In his place stands a follower of Jesus Christ who would die again before he denied Him. Look inside your own heart right now. If He can transform someone like me, someone who threw stones at churches, screamed at worshippers, and used every prayer as a weapon against the people God loved most, then He can absolutely transform you. No matter what you have done or where you come from. But hear this, the prayer that angers God is not the prayer of someone who has failed and cries out for mercy. The prayer that angers God is the prayer of someone who stands before Him with a spotless record and a heart full of contempt.